Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Mark Earshai, and I'm the director of the Odyssey Arts Initiative, an initiative founded in summer 2020 for the advancement of art through the open inclusion of diverse perspectives,
Hello, everyone,
identities,
and good afternoon.
and backgrounds.
My name is Mark Earshot.
As part of our initiative, we are excited to present the Odyssey Institute series, a platform for thinkers, artists, activists, and educators to discuss and brainstorm upon ideas to further Odyssey's mission throughout the arts. The Odyssey Institute's work primarily takes place in the form of conversations, thus encouraging open dialogue on a wide swath of topics. These conversations are then condensed and codified into materials such as handouts, videos on demand, and presentations in the Odyssey Forum. The forum acts as a resource for artists, administrators, and audience members to learn about ways to promote community building, to include identities and backgrounds in programming and case-making for the arts, and to interact more effectively with audiences. In our latest edition of the Odyssey Institute series, we were joined by guest speaker Dr. Michael Nickens, director of the Green Machine Band of George Mason University, and Ethiopian singer-songwriter Munit Mesfin. You can view the entire conversation, as recorded live, on our YouTube channel. Today, we are joined by two incredibly thoughtful and poignant music educators, performers, and arts administrators who will be discussing how to foster curiosity and creative case-making in classical music. First, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this afternoon's discussion, Josanne Francis. Josanne was born and raised in the Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. She is internationally known as a Steelpan musician and music educator. Her music blends together influences from traditional calypso music, jazz, Indian, funk, rock, and classical music, a unique mix which is not typical for the instrument of steelpan. Josanne's work has led her to recently accept an appointment as executive director of the Cultural Academy for Excellence, a youth-based program which uses the performing arts as the catalyst to develop the passion and discipline for learning, leadership, and academic achievement. For more information, please feel free to visit her website at josannefrancis.com. Joining Josanne this afternoon is our guest speaker, John Morgan Bush. John Morgan is working to change the face of classical music in the 21st century, and he takes a multifaceted approach to define a new model for the role of the artist as administrator, believing that all acts associated with making music possible are forms of music making. John Morgan Bush is an incredibly accomplished French horn player, winning second prize in the 2008 International Horn Society solo competition, as well as the John Clark Award for Excellence in Brass Performance. John Morgan holds an adjunct faculty position at the Mannes School of Music, part of the New School in New York City, and was recently named as the first ever director of lifelong learning at the Juilliard School, where he will lead the evening division. Please welcome John Morgan Bush and Josanne Francis. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Mark. Oh, Josanne, you're up.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Take it away.
All right, it's indeed my pleasure to be here with you all today and to engage in these discussions about fostering creativity and curiosity when it comes to classical music. So I'm really excited for our discussion today. John?
Yeah, I would just want to echo the same. I'm super thrilled to be here. And I think that I just like to say that what the Odyssey Arts Initiative and the Institute is trying to do is a wonderful and much needed goal in this time. And I'm happy to be here to share ideas and participate in this conversation.
Certainly, certainly. And, you know, I can echo what you said too. And the fact that we are still able to come together and have these type of discussions given the global crises that are happening currently, it really shows that, the work that we do is very, very important. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So today, the title of the discussion is Fostering Curiosity and Creative Case Making for Classical Music. So my first question for you, John, is what is casemaking and how is that relevant for classical music?
Sure. So I think if we all could think back to maybe April, late March, April, in the as the pandemic was really beginning to unfurl in a serious way in the United States, and many of us saw our sector of the arts world impacted deeply by this, and many people were furloughed, or events were canceled, and we couldn't have live concerts anymore, and many no theater, all this stuff, and in many parts of the country that remains to be so right now. And I certainly at that time, while I was very fortunate enough to have multiple projects and things that I was working on, I really found myself asking some existential questions about the arts and thinking about, well, what happens if they don't come back? What happens if things, we were faced with all parts of society with the worst possible situation. So I found myself asking that about the arts too. And I said, well, that just can't happen. I mean, we will, the arts have persisted since there have been humans. We've had some sort of expression, and it's taken many different shapes, but that got me thinking about where it's going. So to answer your question, what is casemaking? Casemaking is the reason why someone should support you in an endeavor. So you're going to make the case to get support. So that support could be philanthropic, financial, attendance. It could be any number of things. But so I was thinking about when the glorious day comes that we have, kind of COVID behind us, so we're back into our concert halls or theaters or stadiums or whatever it is. And I think about, how are we going to have to think about getting support for the public when we've been absent from their lives in many capacities for a long time. So I began to think a lot about case making, and it really became clear to me that, and from my view, that the ability to make a strong case for what we do at the individual level as an artist, at the institutional level for an arts organization, at the national level for funding, we have to find ways to talk about what we do that are new, that really are with the current moment. So a little bit about case making. When we think about case making, we've heard some things that you might hear that are a little cliche, at least in the classical music world. So it doesn't mean they're not true, but they're a little cliche, like music is the universal language, right? Or we will make our response to war will be to make music. That was a famous Leonard Bernstein quote. Not untrue at all. They're beautiful sentiments, but they've been used and we've relied on them for, really 20 or 30 years, several decades, in terms of building, philanthropic support and talking about the value of what we do. And so they feel to me in this moment that they are a little bit disconnected from the world and the reality that we're in terms of the urgency that I think many of us feel that we have to get back in our halls. We have to begin making art again. So how do we think about that in terms of outwardly communicating what we do? So a case statement is simply, why should they care? Why should other people, another audience, the public, funders, whoever, why should they care that we need support and need to be invested in? So when I was talking to Mark a few months ago, and we were saying, well, what do you think is one of the most important things to come out of this COVID-19 crisis? And for me, it really is the ability to use this time when we're all not, maybe not performing and working and making our craft right now, to really have these conversations that we never quite find the time to do during normal times, to really dive deep on what's the reason, what's the why do we exist? And that answer is different for everyone.
Right. The arts is, and as you said, like you have the cliche things, it's a universal language. Everything arts is the answer. So, it is such a universal thing. It's everywhere, it's in every culture. So we might be asking ourselves as artists, like, why do I have to make a case for it? I mean, we need the arts. Like, everyone loves the arts. The world would be nothing without the arts. So then that brings me to something else. So why is it that we really need to make a case for the arts, like even absent of COVID? Like, why is it that we really need to keep, having to make a case,
Well,
for arts?
I think that the answer to that is pretty, at least one answer to that question is because of the economic situation we're about to enter, right? So we've seen the economic over the past few months, the economic downturn. The way that that will play out, based on how it played out in the 2008 economic recession, is the current year is not necessarily the worst year because there's still savings from when we didn't have, from programs that were canceled and things like that, right? So people, there were some savings involved, and the pandemic hasn't played out over a full year yet, so we don't know
Right.
where it's going. So what will start to happen, though, is we're going to start to need to make appeals to our audiences to support our organizations and to support the artists who literally make the thing itself. And so we're not the only ones who have to make that support. We're not the only, there are many, many other deserving entities and nonprofit agencies who have to lobby for that support. I can think of so many homeless shelters, food services, educational services. There's so much out there that's all trying to lobby for a relatively, a limited amount of philanthropic support. So as a horn player, as an artist myself, I don't need to, and I'm sure this is kind of what you're saying, I don't need to make a case for why what I do and what I've invested my life in doing is important. I know deep down why the act of making music is essential, not only to me, but to the human experience. That's kind of ingrained in who I am.
Hmm.
The issue comes, though, when we need to organize and have a financial model to support this, and we come together. And I mean, as me as an individual horn player, I rely on the organization of orchestras or entities that I can make my craft in, right, to play in. So so thinking through that, I would like to kind of rethink about, instead of another way to think about case making of, what's your why we're doing this and why we're essential, to society. Another way is thinking about is storytelling. So when you think about the practice of your art form, whether that's theater or music or dance, it's a deeply individual personal experience, and that experience is very compelling and inspiring. And so I think one of the things that COVID-19 has forced our hand at, like so many things, is it's without the absence of a stage and a performance and the traditional sort of experience, many organizations have had to rethink how do people engage with us. And they've done that by showcasing individual musicians and individual members of the organization. And when they do that, that storytelling, all of a sudden, it kind of tears down that invisible third wall, and it really allows audience members or constituents to sort of have a stake in an individual person and a person's life, and it becomes a much more human connection. I mean, the thing about philanthropy is it can be a little sterilized sometimes. I'm giving my money to a 501c3. I get a tax write-off for that, but and I'm supporting an organization. But when we storytell, you really feel like you're supporting the individuals and the artists. And so that's something else that I think about too. So storytelling the why we exist and why we're essential in society, and those that can do it in the most compelling way, I think will fare quite well after. They'll be able to fare the best. The ones who don't do that, there's a lot of other, sort of compelling necessities in our society. So I think we have to really have a strong position on why we should be here.
I mean, definitely. And I mean, I do see what you were just saying about different organizations and orchestras taking the opportunity, though, I mean, it's COVID, but it's an opportunity to showcase different individual musicians. And I think what I've discovered as well is that some of these individual musicians may not have had many opportunities before to excel as individuals because they've been in this really structured environment of playing with an orchestra or with a band, that they didn't really get the opportunity to, come out as as their own. So I do see that, and based on what you're saying, it seems like, um, so I have this next follow up question on that. So we know the arts is important, and we'll dive a little deeper into that a little bit later. But the way the pandemic has impacted people emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and of course physically. We as artists, we know that the arts is even more important now. So do you think then that case making would be easier, seeing that there's an increased need for the arts, or do you think it might be a little bit more difficult, seeing that people are coming out of, well, we're still in the pandemic, but
I do think that it could be a little bit easier, because some of the things that we know that the arts have healing properties. They heal the mind and the soul. In many cases, we know that they can help heal the body as well. But like being able to tell people that and bring people to a new level of awareness. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about today too is the pandemic has in many ways limited our options for entertainment, for things to do, for travel, for all kinds of things in our lives, right? So one thing that I think is really interesting is we have this body of people who are looking for something to engage with. And I think, you can only go so far on your favorite binge series. You can only go so far. I mean, I know that I ran out of patience with TV and movies after a while.
I have to.
Yeah, I know, right? There's only so far you can go. So I think there's a moment here where it's not that at least in classical music, for example, that we can. It's not like we're connecting for the first time with people. We've been doing this work since there have been orchestras. It's about a reconnection and a stronger connection. And so that leads me to this this topic of curiosity and what how curiosity fits into our conversation today. I really do believe that curiosity is the sister to creativity. Creativity is a spark of imagination. It's imagining some new possibility out of nowhere. It's so many things. Creativity is an expression, but curiosity is the prerequisite to creativity. There has to be an interest which leads to observation and investigation in a topic. And I think that is one of the things that we as a field could work very hard on right now. I've worked in education from children as early as 6 years old in my professional life, all the way to seniors in their early 90s. I have worked at a professional level across the gamut. And what I've seen so much is we have an incredible investment in our field in early childhood and K-12 programs, youth orchestras, in-school programs, field trips for kids, teaching artists. These things all probably sound kind of familiar. And we know that we have whole education wings devoted to cultivating an interest and ability in children in classical music. Completely valid work. As a degree holding music educator, I absolutely believe in this. But there's also a gap, and that gap happens in adult education in the arts. And one of the goals of trying to bring our art, whether that's classical music or dance or theater or any of the performing arts to children, is to spark an interest in them. And so we spend a lot of time and energy doing that. But what we don't do is we don't spend a lot of dedicated time and energy trying to maintain interest and maintain curiosity about our field as people age. We feel like, and in many cases it's true, you get someone in the door, you hope that if they've crossed that threshold to become an audience member, we typically see, okay, we're going to move them along the scale of like, I've heard about this orchestra, to now I'm buying a ticket, to now I'm donating, to now I'm volunteering, to now I'm on the board, to, there's like a participation scale we try and put people on. And I think that works for some people. That works for your like superstars, you know, your people who really do are like really supportive. And those are the people you should have in leadership roles, like the board. But there's a whole pool of people who just need to stay curious, and they just like it and they want to learn. So what I want to think about too is in our ability to case make and our ability to talk about why we should be supported. Another reason is to think about why people should continue to be curious about us. What reasons do we give them to continue to be curious about what we do? Now, that's something else that's been brought forth with the COVID-19 pandemic, because with the inability to perform in concert halls or even have two musicians within 6 feet of each other on a stage somewhere, we've had to come up with all these different ways for people to engage with one person or a handful of instruments. I mean, the New York Philharmonic right now is doing their Bandwagon series where they literally have a truck, a pickup truck, that drives around New York City and does impromptu pop-up concerts and musical performances for people. And that's a really great way of getting just people curious about what we do. And so I really, you know, curiosity is not a fixed substance. You know, you can think about your own life. You know, there are periods of your life where you are really on a baking kick and you do a lot of baking and you really love cooking, and then you kind of get off of it for a little while, and then a few years later you're like all back into baking or cooking or, you know, home renovation or anything like that, right? As adults, our curiosity is not consistent. So as organizations, we should be saying, what do we have to do to keep people curious? Because it's a way to get people to support us also.
Indeed, indeed. Like, I mean, and I can attest to that with even within my own organization, Cafe. There is definitely that gap. You know, we have invested a lot in the kids, children, and then when they leave, we hope that they could kind of carry it on. But then there's the parents. You know, how do we keep the parents engaged? How do we maintain curiosity in the parents so that they can, you know, keep passing it on? And I think also with COVID, you know, with what you just said about what's happening in New York, you know, I mean, it sucks that COVID had to happen for these things to come about, even more so. But I just hope that these things can still carry on even after we make it past COVID. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, COVID-19 and its impact on the industry has been devastating. And I see so many of my peers and colleagues, you know, who are without work right now. And I have every belief that we will get back into our halls. We will be playing. We will be performing again. I think you're right to acknowledge that. I think, you know, and for me, it's about saying this time has really sucked, frankly. And so how do we salvage some of this? You know, what do we do right now to strengthen our ability to come back as quickly as possible? So, you know, to whoever's watching this, I want you to know that if you've been impacted, your career has been impacted by COVID, my heart really does go out to you and to all of our colleagues. And it's not to say that I don't want anyone to, you know, walk away saying that I think that COVID-19 has been a good thing for our field. It certainly hasn't, but it has had an impact, and that impact has been an acceleration of trends that were already on the horizon. We could talk about that for a little bit too. I mean, the use of new
Sure, yeah.
technology, the use of digital stages, digital performance, challenges to rights and intellectual property for digital performances and those issues. Web-based platforms, online learning, just so many things that had been sort of on our horizon. We knew were happening, but we were reluctant to deal with because we're so focused on making the thing. We're so focused on creating the thing and making it and putting that on that there is no time to think about anything else. And so, I mean, my hat really does go off to anyone who has been working throughout this and trying to find ways to help organizations adapt. And just, I know that I truly believe that if you're working in the arts during this time, your job looks nothing like whatever it was you were hired to do. Like, I'm sure you're doing a million different things. But we have space because we're not on stage right now. And because we have that time, I think we have to try and make the best that we can and think about whatever we can do to optimize a return. And that's kind of where my position comes from.
Yes, and I would also add to say that the community, your communities are very supportive, especially now. I couldn't tell you how many people's driveways that I played in since the pandemic, because pre COVID, someone has a birthday party, they're going out somewhere to gather in a a big congregation of people doing different things. But now they're looking within their community to see, okay, who in my community plays an instrument? Maybe they can come entertain me and my family, in a very intimate setting. Intimate, but CDC guidelines.
Well, that you bring up a fantastic point, and that is the fact that we as artists, we've had to rely on our community. We've had to the pandemic. I don't care if you're an artist or not. You've had to rely on people you don't know to help get you through this and to bring you closer in your community. So when I talk about case making, one of the key ingredients, I think, to making a strong case for any ensemble or any organization when on our way out of this is for that the case has to be community based. It has to reflect your need not to a greater societal sort of ideology, but about the immediate people you serve. It gets very clear about who you serve and who's around you. And so I think that is a big piece of this, is that it community-based case making will really be important after this. And I think that we've never maybe had to rely on each other quite so much. I mean, I'm part of this Facebook group, COVID-19 support for musicians. It may have started off as a New York-based group, but it just became like thousands and thousands of members join. And I was so taken by so many artists from all stripes of life in the field. They were all helping each other and coming together and offering advice and helping to navigate the unemployment system versus like sharing information about aerosol studies, about choirs returning in the Midwest. I mean, it was just fascinating to see.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, yes, yes. So we're talking about case making, and specifically for classical music. There are some people who say, I don't like classical music, and they can say that about any type of music. So my question for you, and I know we talked earlier about, you generate that interest, generate that curiosity so we can get into some creativity. So why do you think that people don't like classical music, for those that say they don't? And how do you introduce them to classical music?
Well, I think you have to step back a little bit from the presumption that someone doesn't like classical music. So I think to say that I don't like it means to say that I have listened to enough of it to make an educated assessment of my taste, with intent, right? I don't. I think you can, you have to really dig a little bit deeper than that. And when I say educated, I don't mean in terms of like, book knowledge about the topic. What I mean is I haven't taken the time to listen to enough of it to really determine to say that you don't like something as large as classical music, for example, that spans centuries and genre. I mean, it's immense, right? So it's not even realistic to say that someone's going to like all of it either, right? I don't like all of classical music, and I'm a classical musician. So I think part of it is, with every person who says that, there's a little bit of an opportunity. I think there's a little bit more to that too, because what I've seen a lot is that people, they say they don't like something because sometimes they might have an apprehension about how to engage with it, for example. So, if you are made to feel uncomfortable by something, then because you feel insecure about your own knowledge or your own etiquette or behavior, then or the associations with the topic, right? So then you might inherently just try and steer away from it. So I think this is this thing I'm talking about people that say they don't like it. If someone came to me and said, I don't like piano music. The sound of the piano gets on my nerves, right? Okay, that's a little bit, an argument that's a little bit more refined, right? But that sort of blanket statement, I don't want to say that, because I feel like it's just so vast. So it's our job as artists to help people make connections and help people to feel comfortable with what we do. And I've been talking about some of this stuff since 2008, the last recession. But when we come out of this, the most important thing that people are missing right now in their lives is a sense of contact and community. I mean, we literally have a policy in place of physical distance, social distancing. It is not healthy to be close to other people outside of your immediate, circle. And I keep thinking about, I'm a very avid concert goer. And so I keep thinking about what that moment's going to be like when I can be back at the Metropolitan Opera, which is one of my favorite places to be. And I can be in that seat and I can share that experience with other people. And so I think that we have to let people know what kind of what vision we have for that space when we come back out of this, and how that might be different than what they've expected before. How it could be a place for them to have an emotional, safe, emotional experience and share it with people. And if you start talking about what we do, which is no different than what we know it to be, but we start talking about it in a different way, then, or even the online experience, like, come together, experience this music together. We're going to talk about, give you some context for it, and then talk about the kind of catharsis you can have in classical music. I mean, people are desperate for that right now, and so that's something that uniquely we can fulfill. I ask my students, sometimes I'll say, if I'm a chemist, the tools of my profession are chemicals and elements, right? If I'm a mathematician, the tools of my trade are numbers. That's what I use. If I'm a carpenter, it's wood and materials, right? If I'm a musician, what is the tools of my trade? And many people always say, they'll say, sound. They'll say, no, it's not sound, it's emotion. That's what we deal with, is emotion. And if we could find a way to collectively talk about that and offer people a safe place to come and process this incredibly traumatic thing that's happened to us all and share that, I mean, I think people would really feel like an invitation to come and do that and share that experience. It's an incredible thing that we offer. And I can just think of times in my life where I've experienced live music that's really brought me to the edge of emotional thresholds for myself. And I think this is something we could really offer to everyone. The way we say that is not, music is a universal language and it can transform you, right? We don't say it that way. We say it in a different, more powerful way, a new way that can bring people into our audience's seats. And I think what we'll see is a lot of people who said before, I don't like classical music. If we can find out why, we can address some of those things that make people uncomfortable, and we can make a really strong case as to why what we're doing is valuable to them, to that person in a community. I mean, that's like the golden arrow that does everything. So.
Right. And so as we're talking about the audiences and their experience, the emotional experience, currently there is a lot of, I mean, for lack of a better term, emotional turmoil across the United States, in terms of inclusiveness, etc. So my next question is, so how do you foster inclusive spaces for audience members in classical music?
Absolutely. Well, this is a time when we all need to be thinking about our own individual ensembles, our own individual organizations, our own individual spaces. This is also a time of a lot of decision making for a lot of organizations. So what I saw in 2008 and 2009, 11 was a mass sort of realignment in the field. I wouldn't say mass exodus, but many places offered people early retirement to leave, which created positions, and many people, left the field or took early retirement out of their freelance life and performing. So both from the performer side and the arts administration side, there was a lot of vacancy that happened, which in turn created a lot of career shifts and career changes in the years that followed this. So this is that's coming if it hasn't started already. And now is the time for organizations to really begin, we've been talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and at Juilliard we talk about belonging for almost a decade now in the arts. And I really do feel that this is the time, this time that's coming up is for arts organizations to make the effort, to do the work, to have the conversations, and to do the kind of open searches that they need to do to increase their institution's capacity to be inclusive. If we do that, both on the stage and off the stage, then we can better reflect the communities that we serve, and we have a real case to make by saying, look at us, look at the choices we've made as organizations. We work for you in the community, and we look like you, and we engage with you, and that is so important. And it's also artistic choices as well. I mean, I think that we have to think about one of the things that the conversations, and I'm a part of a lot of these conversations, is we tend to talk a lot about the administrative side, and also auditions and blind auditions versus a new version of auditions. And one of the things that we don't really talk about are who is making artistic decisions in the organization, and how are those artistic decisions aligning with a new part of the mission to be more inclusive or equitable, or to support a more diverse perspective artistically. And so one of the things that I think we've made incredible progress actually in the field through the generosity of like the Andrew Mellon Foundation and many others, Ford Foundation, who have really committed to helping the field become more inclusive. The one thing that I think we have to find now is a way to be artistically authentic in these efforts. And so how do we do that? And how do we have those conversations? I don't think that I could sit on this call today and prescribe one way. It has to be unique to each individual organization and the musicians and the people who are involved. And that goes for every individual community too. It has to be highly customizable. I think the trouble we get in as a field is when we start to say that what works for one should work for everybody. I mean, there are definitely best practices, but a small symphony in the Midwest is not, a major symphony in the Northeast is not a dance company in Washington, D.C. It's all different and all has different people. And I really do feel that listening is a huge part of that. I think it's a little bit foolhardy to say that we can just go out and say, okay, I'm going to program X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden, bing, bang, boom, we have a more inclusive artistic plan. You really need to, there are so many incredible composers of color, women composers, LGBTQ composers out there. There's so many interesting, wonderful, brilliant people making music that you could be commissioning and working with in the new music field. The issue is you need to talk to your audience and your community and find out the kinds of things they're interested in, right? And maybe then align yourself with composers or artists or performers who reflect that, guest artists, guest soloists, guest conductors who reflect that. Mm-hmm. I think we're Henry Thames, who is the new president and CEO of Lincoln Center, he wrote a book called New Power. And he co-wrote it. And this idea of new power is about a collective participation, which defines engagement with people. So getting people to participate is the goal rather than making people aware. That's just one kind of topic from the book. And so I think that when you have, if we leave this time of kind of isolation and just open the doors to participation, whether that's in the artistic process or the music making process or in access for adults and children. If we find ways for people to participate more than the passive consumption of what we do, that is going to give our audience members and our stakeholders a new role to fulfill. They will feel differently about what they're doing and their role. They won't feel like, oh yeah, I buy tickets to the symphony. They're saying, oh, I'm a supporter of the symphony. And what does that mean? So it's a more holistic vision, but we have to listen. We have to ask our audiences what they want. And we should, cater and serve to those things.
Yeah, I am, I'm a strong advocate for all of that. And I think the most important step that an artist or an organization could take is to first just engage with their community. What you just said, find out who is in the community, find out what they like, where they come from, what was it like for them growing up, what were their experiences, and taking that approach as opposed to just simply trying to fill some type of quota or some type of formula would definitely be, as you said, more authentic, as opposed to forced. And the participation and engagement will definitely go up that way, and you'll have more success. And, speaking of success, I would like to ask you, what does success look like in the arts? And I'm not just talking about for the musician, I'm talking for the musician, the organization, the audience, the community. Like, what does success look like?
Well, you're absolutely right. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I have a short list of kind of what I think. First of all, we've got to get our artists back working. We've got to get our artists back to working and making and creating and playing together and revitalizing. So a sort of a revitalization of our artistic workforce. That's to me, that's success number one. Number two is sustainable models. We have to come out of this pandemic. So what the pandemic has shown us is that the models we use to operate were incredibly fragile, right? This pandemic came along and it shut them down. And other parts of industry in the country, they weren't totally shut down. They were impacted, but they maybe weren't completely shut down 100%. So we have to think about ways that future pandemics, or if COVID doesn't go away, future outbreaks or any kind of global warming, any kind of global or economic or climate impacts, how do we create a model that is adaptive enough to revamp or redirect quickly and still serve our audiences? That's a huge piece of this, is a new model for doing business. Because like I said, COVID-19 just ushered in something that we knew was already not working very well, but it was working okay. But now it truly has to be re-envisioned. I also think that, as at least in the United States, but I would say around the world, success would look like a great sort of unification or coming together of sharing of people of different points of view, beliefs, political views, religion. I mean, all the things, having we can do, in this case, music is a universal language and can speak to all of us despite our individual views. And so I feel like, especially in this country right now, we're so divisive. Success in the arts would look like our ability to unify and bring people together. I think that's a huge thing. And also for us to be able to talk about it, to make it a public goal, that's something that we want to do. We have to signal to people that we are wanting to do this for them to want to participate and come together, right? If we signal to our audiences that we can serve as a place of unification, serve as a place of coming together, for those people who want that, then they will respond. So signaling is a huge thing. And then I think the other thing that we're going to come out of this success is a new vision for digital stages and digital performance. And I think the digital world is here to stay. And in the arts, we had really eschewed that for decades, saying that the live experience was the only experience. And in many ways, I still believe the live experience is essential, and it cannot be replaced. However, the COVID-19 crisis has told us that that the digital experience is also essential. And I think that we have to come out of this and say, I think if we say to ourselves, oh, I just can't wait till COVID's over so we can go back to doing what we were doing. I think that the right thing to say is, I can't wait till the pandemic subsides so I can go back to making music and we can be together again. But I also hope that we can continue to learn from what we did in the digital space and build on that too, because there's a lot of opportunity there. And we have to make up for lost time. So those are kind of my areas for success I'd like to see nationally and globally in the arts.
Wow, I love it, and I love this dialogue we're having. Too bad we have limited time, but as we begin to wrap up, I just want to ask you just one more thing. We've been speaking and referring to the arts and its importance. Can you tell our audience of artists, community members, anyone, why do the arts and why does classical music matter right now?
We've just lived through something that is probably the most devastating thing that many of us have seen. One of the top most devastating things that we've seen in our lifetime. I mean, I think that September 11th rivals that for many people, but for at least my generation, the millennial generation, this is us as fully grown adults out in the world. So this is the first world crisis where we've been adults functioning and dealing with this. And I think the isolation that has come from it and the impact of being alone or being, secluded and not allowed to share with other people. The value of the classical music right now is that helping people to make sense of these emotions and helping people to explore them safely and have a almost a guided meditation to do them. I mean, that's one of the things that I see, and I really believe that classical music can do that and can help people heal. I certainly know that that's the journey that I go on every time I listen to Hilary Hahn's recording of the Bach Partita, from the D minor Partita, the Chaconne. And every time I hear that, I go on my own journey. And if we could help other people find their peace, their own journey, what they need, it's a healing process, and it could be very valuable to anyone right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I couldn't say it any better. But thank you so much, John. And I mean, it's definitely been a pleasure chatting with you and having this dialogue.
You too.
I know that like Odyssey and what you said before about just communities coming together, I mean, globally, and bringing together our different perspectives. Odyssey is pretty much doing that right now, and Odyssey is essential during the pandemic. So thank you so much, Mark, and I'll defer to you right now.
Well, thank you both for being here. That was a great segue, and seriously, thank you both. You've covered so many things in this conversation. It's going to be a little bit difficult to figure out where to begin with our questions, which we'll now be accepting from our viewers. We do have a question, one question already, which I will field very quickly. This is a question, I believe, for you, John Morgan. What are some common things that we might often do that are, in your opinion, counterproductive to the development of audiences in classical music? And thank you, Christian Perez, for this question.
Great. So one of the things I think that we do is we make assumptions about who our audience is. So I really think it's important to spend time. The Wallace Foundation has some wonderful, wonderful research out about building sustainable audiences and about getting the staff of organizations who are in charge of marketing or in charge of decisions, really to get them around a table and have really great discussions about who you serve and how you serve them. So making assumptions about our audiences or the public is really a dangerous game to play. So I think that's definitely counterproductive. That's one thing. In terms of other things too, I think that we take ourselves a little too seriously sometimes, our traditions. some traditions are sacred, and I mean, I think everybody has a different opinion of what that is, but one thing that COVID-19 taught me is that everything is on the table. The things that everything is on the table. So I think it would be a good time to look and see, well, what do we really expect? What do we really have to have in order to fulfill our mission? And if we can get rid of any unnecessary luggage, now would be the time to do it.
Absolutely. While we're waiting for further questions, I do have a couple of my own that I'll field now. The first is for you, Josanne. I want to ask because you have probably a different perspective in terms of case making. I think case making is probably very relevant for you in terms of your work as the executive director of Cafe. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you feel for perhaps other genres is different and is the same as what John Morgan talked about.
I think a lot of it transfers because at the end of the day, it's about the arts and the organization that I am the executive director of is arts based, arts and education based. So many times when we are trying to make a case, and most of the times it's for funding, we are nonprofit, we rely heavily on work samples and people actually coming and visiting our program site because with our, I mean, the main instrument that we use is the Steelpan, and it's very, very new when you compare it to a lot of other musical instruments, or even if you compare calypso music to other genres of music. And what I do, and what I try to instill in my students as well, is to really just show off the profundity of the instrument by stepping out of the genre of calypso and by stepping out of what they think is fun to play, and really trying to get philanthropists or possible donors to come and visit, because with the arts, and earlier on we talked about the face-to-face experience of being in the room, being in the concert hall, because it does make a difference being there in person, because you cannot necessarily transfer vibe digitally. So I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of case making for classical music as well as for arts education. But a lot of times with my organization, we have to think outside the box and step outside of what is comfortable for the students in order to really make a strong case for what we do.
Sounds like you're making a very strong case.
Definitely, it does. John Morgan, I have a question for you. You talked earlier in the conversation about that organizations need to be inclusive in a way that is artistically authentic. I think there has been there have been some movements to really try to open up the conversation about organizations that have trouble doing so. Things like movements on social media accounts that are dedicated specifically for that kind of purpose. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, because I'm sure you come across all the time professionals and administrators who may not necessarily be open to the idea of change and may not be open to the idea of really reconsidering their communities, not necessarily changing their assumptions about their audiences, things that you've cautioned against a lot in this conversation. I'm wondering what your advice would be when dealing with an organization or a group of administrators or people like that who are in that kind of mindset.
Yeah, so I have encountered it professionally in different places throughout my career, and I'll say this, that in almost every one of those instances, the pushback comes from the mistaken belief that if we add more of something new, we have to take away from something else, or if we place more importance on something different, we're de-emphasizing what we have known. And I think that is like one of the biggest fallacies. Talking about something that holds organizations back, I can really feel that is. And I think that part of it is if you can just create a culture of yes and in your institution, where you're not afraid of new ideas. I mean, really strong leaders and leadership really help their staff and their musicians and whoever to really learn how to embrace a culture of yes, or an open growth mindset to things. And that's something that takes professional development and work. But to be able to say, well, we need to bring, our repertoire is heavily Western, canonical Western classical music, quote unquote masterworks, or the sort of war horses we play all the time. And we want to bring in a new composer, and et cetera, et cetera. So if you can help the people who are at that table, whoever that is, to say yes, and we could do this, yes, and we could do that, rather than saying no, right? If we can create that tiny decision, that tiny openness, I think that's a huge place to be able to let them feel valid in the belief that the works that they love are sacred, because no one is ever going to tell me that some of the works of J.S. Bach are not sacred to me, right? Because that's how I believe, that's how I feel, that's my emotional, involvement. I've invested so much of years of my life listening to some of these things, right? But that doesn't mean that that doesn't invalidate someone else. And so being able to create that ability to weigh two things as different but equal, that is something that really has to be worked on. And that is the work of leaders and in administrations to bring about that change with their staff and their teams. And boards should really insist that that kind of training and that kind of professional development happens.
On the topic of boards, I know that we talked a little bit about your work at the League, um, uh, and you gave me a wonderful resource on the organizational structure of a board for a classical music organization. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so governance is essential. Healthy boards equal healthy orchestras, healthy organizations, period. Period. There is no but. Healthy boards equal healthy organizations. And boards should be reflective of a community. They should, of the community that you serve. Boards should be a place where everyone has a stake. And so I'm a big fan of having musicians have a seat on the board, and that is an elected position, I feel like, so that there is a voice at the table that helps to keep things, I think, open and transparent. Transparency is huge. We are nonprofits. We are not corporate organizations. I truly believe that a budget should be so transparent you could put it on a bulletin board in a hallway. I mean, I really do feel that way. And so I think that also thinking through your trustees and really thinking through asking them, what can you give, what can you do, not just financially, but who can you connect us to, how can we expand. I mean, they are the board cultivation should be your greatest asset in an organization. And so if you're out there listening to this and you're a staff member or an executive director of an organization, or you're thinking about starting your own initiative, I cannot tell you how important it is to become familiar with governance and good governance practices. Board Source is a wonderful place for you to go and really ask those tough questions about, what is my board doing right now, and trying to get that motivation going. And Josanne, I don't know if you have a board for your organization, but I would assume that as an executive director, it's helpful for you to have people to bounce ideas off of and have conversations with, right?
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. So, moving into this executive director role, prior to me running the organization was actually run by its founder. So I know with typically when you have the founder running the organization, the board is like, okay, you do what, whatever you envision, you do it, kind of way. So I think with me moving into this role now, the board is playing a much more active role. And I mean, I'm reporting to them. So I am looking to them for guidance. I'm looking to them for support. And they have to be like a really, really strong and functional unit. Because if they're not, it's going to reflect in the organization.
And I will just say also, talk about how important it is to keep people curious. You have to keep your trustees curious about the work you're doing. You want them to be involved. You want them to be passionate, and you want the work you're doing to be real to them, right? So it's all about keeping them engaged.
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
We do have a question from a viewer question. This is a bit of a music history question, so I'm not sure how we're going to answer this, but we're going to try. The question is, so back in the 70s, how did they hear both disco music and classical music and figure out that they work really well together? And I guess that's a question that has to do with also with kind of programming and being a yes person as well, that you talked about a little bit earlier too.
Well, I think Andrew Simonet has a quote that I love, and I think about it a lot, and it's that the role of art versus entertainment. And it's easy for us to start classifying things and putting labels on different kinds of music and what is entertainment and what is art and et cetera. And we could debate each other for hours and have all kinds of reasons, but Andrew Simonet has a great one that I share frequently with my students, is that entertainment serves to distract us or take our attention away from something, and art helps us to focus it. So depending on the context of what you're attempting to do, it's liquid, it's mercurial. Anything could be art or entertainment depending on how you view it. So and how the context with which it's given. Disco music in the 70s, in a disco, is clearly entertainment. It's meant to distract. It's meant to take your mind off your worries and make you feel good and dance and move. If it's in a different context, if it's in a hall and it's supposed to focus in on an issue or focus in on some component of that, it could easily be conceived as art. So I don't know. That's the kind of guide rules that I put. Josanne, what do you think?
So when I heard the question, I kept thinking of me, my music, and how I integrate my art with others' art. And sometimes a student might come and ask me, "Oh, do you think that I could do this with this?" When it's like two, like oil and water. I'm like, it may not mix, but you know what? Try it. Either you like it or you don't. If you don't like it, don't use it. And you'd be surprised of what goes well together. And I'd use an example as well with when you hear steel pan, when you hear the word steel pan or steel drum, you have a certain picture painted in your head, and you have a certain thing that you would expect. You would never expect to see a steel pan on stage playing alongside a Chinese dulcimer. And that might sound like a wild idea, but it's something that I did here in DC. I collaborated with and still do collaborate with Chao Tian, who plays the Chinese dulcimer. So you have like two completely different instruments from two completely different cultures. One goes way, 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 way further back than the other, but yet you can bring them together. It all has to do with like what you're trying to get from it. And what you just said, just Morgan, what entertainment. All right, what is that you're really trying to get out of it? Go for it, try it. Either you like it, you don't like it. You might like it, someone else may not. But it's whatever your goal is. You need to figure out what your goal is. What are you trying to get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for the answers to Very funny question, but it was a very poignant question. So it got to the heart of a lot of things, which was great. Um, well, I want to take the opportunity to wrap this up, but again, thank you both so much. I'd like to, as a final moment, if you both would like to talk about the organizations that you work for, do a little bit of a plug about them. I guess, Josanne, we'll start with you if you want to talk about Cafe just briefly.
Sure. So as we said earlier, I'm the executive director of CAFE, which stands for the Cultural Academy for Excellence. It's not an actual cafe. It's an arts and education organization. Pre-COVID, we existed as an after-school program and a Saturday academy. And it's a really holistic program. We do homework assistance, tutoring, SAT prep, robotics, yoga. All the students take music theory and do the Maryland State Music Theory assessment. The main instrument that we use is the Steelpan, but we also have samba, we do visual art, we do dance, we do a lot. And it's an arts and education nonprofit. So in addition to that, a year ago, I launched my company called Steel on Wheels. And what's Steel on Wheels? It's a Steelpan education program whereby maybe an organization or a school or a church or some group wants to engage with Steelpan, but they may not have the resources to purchase instruments. So with Steel on Wheels, they just pay like one fee, and my Steel on Wheels company would bring the instruments, we would bring all the lesson plans as well as qualified teaching artists. And my goal or motivation behind that was to make culturally relevant education more accessible and also to create more opportunities for students to learn Steelpan, as well as more opportunities for Steelpan teachers to engage with students. So that's my plug.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. That's fabulous. I will tell you a little bit about what I do. I'm the director of lifelong learning at the Juilliard School, where I lead the school's evening division, which is its adult education and continuing education division. We offer professional development for active performers in all areas of the performing arts, and also we offer a wide range of courses for adults of all ages and abilities who want to engage with music and are curious about the performing arts in dance, drama, and music. So history and appreciation courses, all kinds of piano classes, voice classes, theory courses. There's any number of ways that people want to learn more and take a deep dive with the art that they love. And I'll just add a closing thought to today. Thank you to Mark and to Josanne and to Odyssey for having me today. But I would just encourage all of you who are watching this to stay curious yourself and to stay curious about how you can rethink your art, rethink your craft, rethink the way that you engage with the public and with your audiences. Because when you come out of this, I think there will definitely be a place for us all to make art together with people who have missed us for a very long time. So I wish everyone watching this the absolute best as we continue to climb out of this together. And thank you for all that you do to provide that for our society.
Thank you, John Morgan, for those words. As a final thought, we'd like to encourage you to please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at The Odyssey Arts on all major social media platforms. Also, be sure to check out our website at odyssey-arts.org. You'll want to follow us for more information about upcoming speakers, past speakers, as well as our Odyssey Festival series. Our next speaker next month, as a reminder, will be Ken Avis, who will be speaking about missed opportunities, in part influenced by his work on his documentary film, The Anacostia Delta. We'd like to thank you all again for being here so much. Josanne, John Morgan, thank you again. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.